The stars shimmered silently beyond the curved glass of the observation deck. Space was vast, endless, and to the Elysians comfortably familiar. For millennia, their kind had drifted through galaxies like ghosts, watching civilizations rise and fall with detached curiosity. They were unseen, untouchable, and, in their own estimation, untouchable gods among lesser beings. Commander Vale hovered just above the deck, his body pulsing faintly with the signature iridescence of his species. Like the others, his form was sleek, semi-transparent, built more of energy than matter. To most eyes, he simply wasn't there. His mind, however, was anything but absent. He studied the screen before him, where Earth rotated slowly beneath a digital projection. "This one's different," he murmured, voice like a whisper riding a breeze that didn't exist. Beside him, Envoy Izira shifted, her translucent hands folding behind her back. "You say that every cycle. And every time we leave disappointed." "Not this time," Vale replied, eyes narrowing. "This species, humans, emit anomalous energy bursts, minor distortions in their electromagnetic field. It's messy, unpredictable, unrefined." Izira corrected, "primitive, or evolving." The two stood in silence, considering the implications. Elysians did not interfere. They watched, they catalogued, they never touched. It was a doctrine older than their starships. But Earth had started doing something strange, responding to their passive scans. Not directly, not intelligently, but with just enough noise to suggest the planet felt something. Vale turned away from the screen and addressed the council through the neural link embedded in the crystalline matrix around the room. A dozen more Elysians flickered into partial visibility. Their attention peaked. "We will deploy a small team," he announced. "Minimal interference. Close observation. We need to understand what's happening on that planet." "Violation," came the smooth voice of Minister Thorne, echoing in Vale's mind. "They are beneath notice." "Perhaps," Vale replied. "Or perhaps they're the only ones who've ever noticed us." That silenced the room. 2 days later, the observation pod slid into Earth orbit under full cloak. The technology was flawless. No energy leaks, no detectable mass signature. Elysians prided themselves on perfection. On the forested edges of a human military exclusion zone, the scouting party descended soundlessly, their bodies slipping through light itself. They moved like spirits between the trees. Human drones buzzed overhead, oblivious. Footsteps pressed into dirt, but left no trace. Eyes blinked and saw nothing. Vale knelt beside a tree, his hand hovering above a small metal rod half buried in the soil. It pulsed faintly. A sensor, human, but more advanced than expected. He reached for it, paused, and turned to Izira. She was already scanning the area. "They're tracking disturbances," she said quietly. "But not us. Not yet." There was a crack in her voice, subtle but present. Vale noticed. Elysians did not fear. But even he had to admit, the feeling was unfamiliar and unwelcome. They moved deeper into the zone, following faint transmissions toward what intelligence had identified as a research facility. Something about it drew them in, a strange rhythm in the energy signature, like a pattern on the verge of becoming speech. A call, perhaps, an accident, or a trap. They entered the outer perimeter at night, from the tree-line. The facility looked dormant, low buildings, steel fences, lights that cast long shadows across concrete. Yet something felt off. "I don't like this," said Lyra, the youngest of the team. "We shouldn't be this close. Something's watching." "Nothing can see us," Izira replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Inside the compound, a lone guard paced slowly. He paused, frowned, and looked directly at them. Or rather, through them. "He doesn't see," Vale whispered. Then the guard raised a hand to his ear. "Repeat. Multiple energy anomalies inside perimeter. No visual contact. Feels like pressure, like the air's thicker." The team froze. "He feels us." Lyra asked. "Impossible," Izira muttered, but her tone had shifted. The cracks in their certainty widened. Suddenly, sirens blared, muted and directionless, more a pulse through the earth than a sound in the air. Floodlights snapped on, cutting through the dark like blades. The Elysians vanished from human sight, but the beams followed them all the same. Retreat, Vale commanded, but it was too late. From the building's roof, figures emerged, humans, but armored in sleek exosuits, their visors glowing faintly red. One stepped forward, raising an arm. The ground erupted beneath the Elysians in a web of flickering blue. Pain surged. For the first time in centuries, Vale felt his atoms pulled against themselves. Cloak disrupted. His form blinked. Visible for a second, then another. He stumbled. "They see us," Izira breathed. The lead human leveled a weapon, a compact plasma rifle, calibrated not just for damage, but frequency resonance. She stepped closer, visor locking on Vale, who stood defiant but shaken. "Hands where I can see them," she ordered. He didn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. In silence, 3 Elysians recloaked and vanished into the night. 2 remained, pulsing faintly under the blue net, caught not by strength, but by shock. The woman didn't smile. She didn't react at all, just kept her weapon trained. "All units," she said into her comms. "We've got them. They're real." From the tree line, Vale watched, breathless in a body that barely breathed. For the first time in his long existence, he realized what it felt like to be seen. And suddenly, the entire universe felt smaller. The chamber was cold, not by design, but by necessity. Machines hummed at calibrated frequencies, maintaining optimal conditions for entities that had never been meant to occupy human spaces. Dr. Elena Riker stood before the containment field, arms folded, eyes fixed on the translucent figure suspended within. It shimmered faintly, like a mirage held in place by light. "Still no vocalization?" asked Captain Mara Voss. Stepping beside her, Voss's armor creaked subtly, damp from the rain outside. "Not in any recognizable language," Riker replied. "But there's neural activity. High-frequency pulses, structured thought, just not like ours." Voss studied the creature. Even now, barely visible and certainly not human, it had a presence, a quiet arrogance. "It doesn't look like much for a god." Riker glanced at her. "Is that what it claimed to be?" "No, but it didn't need to." A brief silence passed between them. Behind the glass, the Elysian's form pulsed, then dimmed. It was aware. Voss had seen many things in her years with Project Sentinel. Rogue AIs, off-world pathogens, dimensional tears. But nothing like this. They'd trained for invasions, not encounters. What unnerved her wasn't the alien's appearance or the technology, but its poise. It didn't plead. It didn't panic. It watched. In the adjacent room, the second captive lay dormant. A different posture, wounded, possibly unconscious, or pretending. "I need to speak with it," Riker said, voice low, "without the field, just for 5 minutes." Voss turned to her, brows furrowing. "You're not serious." "We've been trying scans, projections, even telepathic echoes. Nothing penetrates. But the moment I entered the room yesterday, its brain lit up. It's reacting to presence, not signals." Voss exhaled slowly. "You step in there and it turns hostile. I won't have time to pull you out." "Then we both better hope it's as advanced as it looks." Minutes later, the field dimmed just enough for Riker to step through. The air shimmered unnaturally, an almost imperceptible charge humming against her skin. She stopped 2 meters away. The Elysian remained still. "My name is Dr. Elena Riker," she said, her tone calm but firm. "We don't know what you want, but you're here now and we see you. That alone breaks whatever rules you thought protected you." The being tilted its head, slowly, almost curiously. "I'm not here to threaten you," she continued. "But this is a misunderstanding waiting to turn into war." There was a flicker, no sound, no movement, just a flicker of thought, felt rather than heard. Her neural implant buzzed. Unintelligible signals streamed across her HUD. Not language. Patterns, like music without sound. Then a word emerged. "Observe." Riker's heart skipped. The signal wasn't vocalized, but formed within her cognition. Perfect, unmistakable. "You came to observe us?" "Unseen. And yet we saw you." "Impossible." "No, she said. "I think what's impossible is how long you've been watching without anyone noticing. Until now." The Elysian pulsed faintly, as if considering her words. Then it dimmed again, retreating into stillness. Outside the chamber, Voss monitored every biometric reading. Heart rate normal. Neural activity peaking. The alien was responding, but not consistently. It was choosing what to answer. Riker stepped back through the field, exhaling as the seal closed behind her. "It spoke," she said. Voss raised an eyebrow. "Spoke. Projected. One word. Observe. It doesn't understand that observation has consequences here." Voss considered that, then nodded toward the wall display. "Our satellites picked up a faint energy surge an hour ago. Not natural. Orbital, just outside the exosphere. I think their ship's still watching. We have 2 of their kind in custody. Of course they're watching." "They're waiting," Voss said. "And I don't like waiting games with things we barely understand." The command center was tense. Security teams rotated in shifts, drones scanned constantly, and the containment fields were rechecked every hour. Still, Riker felt the air thickening, as though the aliens had altered gravity itself with their presence. Something about them lingered in the space they occupied, resonant, invisible. At midnight, alarms blared. Voss reached the chamber in seconds, rifle drawn. 2 containment fields flickered in and out of phase. The wounded Elysian was gone. "Breach," she snapped. No structural damage. Came the response from control. No signs of movement. But it's gone. Riker entered behind her, stunned. "They're pulling them out." "No," Voss said. "We're being studied. This was never a rescue. It was a test." She turned to the remaining Elysian, which now stood at the far edge of its enclosure, motionless. But Riker could sense it, something new in its stance. Satisfaction. They didn't come to observe. Voss said. They came to see if we'd react. "And we did," Riker murmured, loudly. In orbit, the Elysian vessel adjusted its orientation. Cloaked engines humming at frequencies Earth's instruments couldn't yet register. But one relay tower deep in the Arctic Circle sparked faintly, just enough for its operator to frown and make a note in the logbook. A go signal. Back at the facility, Riker sat alone, reviewing the patterns from the alien's thoughts. There was a rhythm emerging, a cadence in the pulses. If she could map it properly, she might learn more. But in her gut, she knew something was shifting. The Elysians had assumed invisibility was safety. But the moment they were seen, the rules had changed. And humans, once prey, once overlooked, had just become part of the game. The rain hadn't stopped for days. Thick sheets of water blanketed the facility, muting every sound and washing the concrete grounds in a reflective sheen. Captain Mara Voss stood by the window in her office, eyes narrowed as she tracked movement on the far perimeter. Shadows too synchronized to be natural. Drones, most likely. But hers or someone else's. She wasn't certain anymore. Down below, Dr. Riker paced a containment wing, her mind cycling through frequencies and signal patterns faster than her lips could form the words. The remaining Elysian hadn't spoken again, not in the psychic pulse she'd come to recognize, but its presence was undeniable. It wanted something. It simply refused to reveal what. She stopped outside the containment field. The alien didn't look at her, but she could feel its attention like heat, coiling and precise. "You've been watching us," she said. "Centuries, maybe longer. Why now?" The figure remained still, its glow a steady blue. Silence stretched, and for a moment, she thought it was retreating again. Then the lights in the chamber dimmed slightly, not due to a power fluctuation, but by intent. Its intent, a new word formed in her mind. Not like the last. This one felt heavy, sharp. Fracture. Riker frowned. "What do you mean, fracture? Something breaking?" The lights pulsed. A confirmation. She stepped closer, ignoring the sting of static that nipped at her skin. "Us or you?" The Elysian's form shimmered. "Both." Elsewhere in the facility, Voss entered the command center, where a junior officer spun in her chair, pale with panic. "Ma'am, we have something," the officer said, pointing to a screen filled with cascading code and distorted visuals. A burst transmission from orbit, not from our satellites. Show me. The image was a blur at first, then resolved into a strange, impossible structure floating in low orbit. It wasn't solid. It flickered, phased. A ship, vast and fluid, like it bent reality around it. They're not just watching anymore, Voss said grimly. They're positioning. Across the globe, unexplained phenomena began to spike. Electromagnetic distortions in cities. GPS blackouts. Power grids faltering without cause. It wasn't aggressive, yet, but it was coordinated. A pressure test. A quiet flex. Back in the lab, Riker reviewed the new pulses. She plotted them, aligning the intervals and frequencies against known astrophysical data. The result made her blood run cold. It's a pattern, she said aloud. A countdown. From the ship? Voss asked, stepping in behind her. Riker nodded. They're preparing something. Not a weapon, a shift, something reality-altering. You think they're going to change us? I think they already have. The Elysian inside the chamber stirred. It turned toward them, more visibly now than ever. There was no aggression in its posture, no threat, only inevitability. You fractured your own veil when you touched us, Riker said, realization dawning. We weren't supposed to see you, but now we can. Entangled came the next word. A storm of thought flooded her mind. A cascade of images, concepts, timelines collapsing into each other. She staggered back, breath caught in her throat. Voss steadied her. What did it say? That we're linked now, irreversibly. In that moment, alarm screamed through the base. Multiple breaches. Not physical, but perceptual. Guards reported seeing things that weren't there. Hallways that twisted into themselves. Time flickering in uneven bursts. They're shifting reality, Riker whispered, testing how much they can bend without breaking us. Voss barked orders into her comms, deploying emergency protocols. But deep down she knew there was no protocol for this. In a dim corridor, one soldier opened a supply closet and found a mirror reflecting a version of himself that blinked out of sync. Another fired at a shadow that melted into the wall. Across every screen, one phrase pulsed briefly in alien script, then translated. You are seen. The Elysians had existed in the periphery of perception, veiled by their own advanced understanding of dimensional resonance. But Earth, chaotic, emotional, and brimming with unpredictable signals, had pierced that veil. By noticing them, humanity had pulled them into visibility. And visibility had consequences. Back in the lab, Riker turned to Voss, her voice trembling but firm. We need to communicate, really communicate, not through translation or capture, through shared cognition. I think I can sync with it again. That nearly tore your mind apart last time. It's a risk I'll take. The Elysian approached the edge of the field as if it, too, had made a decision. The light around it dimmed, not in surrender, but in focus. Riker closed her eyes and reached out, not with her voice but her thoughts. Slowly, painfully, she bridged the gap, letting go of the linear structure of language and embracing the alien rhythm. Images flooded in, a vast archive of memory. Other planets, other species, all seen, studied, and forgotten. Until now. You see, you change. Riker opened her eyes, tears streaming. They're not gods, she said. They're explorers. But we're the first ones who change them by seeing them. Voss stared at her. And what happens now? Riker turned back to the alien, whose glow began to pulse with an urgency she hadn't felt before. I think, she said quietly. Now they ask if we're ready to see what they've been hiding. Outside, the rain stopped. The clouds parted just enough to reveal something new in the sky, an impossible shape refracting starlight in ways that defied physics. Not threatening, but undeniable. The universe had blinked, and Earth had stared back, and the next move belonged to both. A low vibration pulsed beneath the soles of Dr. Riker's boots as she stepped into the command deck. The walls of the facility groaned, not with strain, but as if reacting to an unseen force pressing in from every angle. Above them, the Elysian vessel no longer flickered invisibly. It hovered in clear view, visible to satellite and naked eye alike, a fractal construct unfolding like a blooming metal lotus in the night sky. Captain Voss stood over the central console, flanked by personnel furiously analyzing streams of incomprehensible data. Her face was a study in control, but her eyes betrayed the weight she carried. The veil between observer and observed had lifted, and with it, any illusion of humanity's isolation in the cosmos. "They've initiated a sync event," Riker said as she approached. "Not just with me. Planet-wide. Every electromagnetic sensitive system is registering subtle harmonics. They're trying to align us. Or prepare us." Voss didn't flinch. "Prepare us for what?" "I don't know," Riker admitted. "But it's not an invasion. If they want to destroy us, they'd never have let us see them." Voss looked toward the ceiling, imagining the ship beyond the clouds. "Then why this slow erosion of normality? These fractures?" "Because whatever's next requires us to be different first," Riker said. "To survive the next step, they need us to adapt. They're forcing evolution, not through biology, but through perception." In the secured observation room, the Elysian stood at the center of its chamber, glowing with rhythmic intensity. Riker watched from behind reinforced glass. There was something in its posture, a quiet urgency. The creature wasn't just waiting anymore. It was inviting. She activated the interlink, no longer content with verbal approaches. The mental bridge had strengthened since their last connection, a thread woven not through machines, but through shared awareness. This time, the contact came easily. Convergence, the thought resonated. Stronger, sharper. What are we converging with? Riker asked mentally, anchoring her consciousness as the weight of the alien intellect washed over her. Origin. Images followed, not visions, but impressions. A web of civilizations, now silent. Dead stars. Broken planets. Everywhere, the same shape. Elysians had watched, but always too late. By the time they were seen, it was over. Until Earth. "You didn't think we'd make it this far," Riker whispered aloud. "You were not meant to." The thought wasn't cruel. It was odd. On the main console, Voss tracked seismic anomalies spreading outward from the base in concentric waves. Not tectonic, but dimensional. Reality at the quantum level was becoming porous. "We can't contain this," she muttered. "We were never meant to," Riker said as she entered the chamber. The Elysian turned toward her. No longer passive, it extended one arm, half energy, half suggestion, and touched the air in front of her. A lattice of light bloomed between them. Not solid, not imaginary. A bridge. For the briefest second, Riker felt everything. Not just thoughts, but the sensation of uncountable lifetimes. The grief of being invisible for millennia. The quiet thrill of discovery. The ache of repeated failure. And then, hope. The Elysian wasn't here to observe anymore. It was offering a choice. Behind the glass, alarms flared red. Voss drew her weapon by instinct, even knowing it was futile. Across monitors, the sky above fractured with prismatic light. The ship had begun transmitting openly, not just a facility, but across a planet. Every human with a radio, a phone, a screen, every device capable of receiving energy, began to vibrate with the same message, not in words, but in a signal every consciousness could feel. See, choose, evolve. Riker stepped forward and placed her hand into the lattice. There was no heat, no pressure, just a release, as if she had let go of gravity itself. Her mind expanded outward, brushing against the edges of something vast. For the first time, she didn't feel like a scientist facing an alien species. She felt like part of something older than stars. She saw a version of Earth untouched by fear, reoriented around perception rather than possession. Cities that bent with intention. Lives lived in rhythm with the truth that everything was connected, not metaphorically, but literally. She saw humanity not as it was, but as it could be. Then she was back. The Elysian withdrew its hand. The lattice faded. Riker stood unharmed, but changed. Voss stared at her, stunned. "What did it do to you?" "Nothing I didn't agree to," Riker said softly. She turned to the monitors, where millions across the globe were still receiving the pulse. Some wept. Some collapsed. Others reached out toward their screens, their windows, the sky, drawn by something they didn't understand but couldn't deny. "They've given us a door," she said. "Now we have to decide whether to walk through." Voss looked back at the alien. Still standing, still waiting. "And if we don't?" Riker's voice was calm. "Then we return to being blind. But we'll never be unseen again." Outside, the ship began to fold back into invisibility. But it didn't leave. It hovered, waiting, silent and patient. This was not the end of contact. It was a beginning of choice. And Earth, at last, was no longer alone.